Hi, and welcome to the Mediatwits number 161. I'm Mark Glazer, Executive Editor at PBS Media Shift. Then we'll be talking about Facebook's new instant articles on mobile, where a group of publishers are taking a trial to allow Facebook to basically serve their stories within Facebook's iOS app. And the revenues will generally go to the publishers. We'll talk about whether Facebook's new instant articles is going to be a boon or a possible problem for publishers in the future. Some of the downfalls, and also some of the advantages to being part of that program. Before we get into the program, I want to first give you a word from our sponsor. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. Now also, MediaShift has just launched a new series of online trainings called Digital Ed. We have a great free webinar on June 17th covering how publishers can engage their audience on social media and drive more revenues, led by Texas State's Dale Blazingame and sponsored by Acquia. Sign up for that webinar at bit.ly/socialrevs. Before we get into our discussion, I want to introduce our panel for this week's show. We have Andrew Lee joining us from American University, Deepa Seetharaman from the Wall Street Journal, John Herman from the All, Michael Sebastian from Advertising Age, Jefferson Yen, our producer in LA. So Facebook, with these instant articles, we knew they've really been trying to get publishers to kind of start putting their content directly onto Facebook, and we all worried about what that means and what the problems could be. And it seems like Facebook really has given some concessions to publishers, saying whatever ads they sell into these stories, they'll keep 100% the revenues. And whatever Facebook sells, they'll still keep 70% of the revenues, plus they will get data on the usage and the users themselves. So it seems like publishers are getting something. But John, I'm curious, you wrote a really great in-depth piece on the All talking about, basically the surrender to Menlo Park and Facebook. But what do you think publishers have to lose in this deal?
I think what is difficult about this discussion still is that it's being framed as like a publishing issue and as something that is about the media. And I think there's very little influence at Facebook coming from the media and the media's like existential concerns. I think Facebook is with instant articles attempting to solve like a very real problem for the service, which is that when you click links, it's kind of slow, and that users who are accustomed to like a particular kind of experience, routinely go to other websites that change that experience, and that feels like a strange thing to have your app users do. But that's kind of how they're thinking of it, and it's all very rational and reasonable from that perspective. I think it is kind of a mistake to assume that Facebook is regarding the media and the news media as like an equal partner, or as an industry whose concerns it really needs to address. It did start with very favorable terms. I mean, 70% advertising cut for ads sold by Facebook is great. I'm guessing that'll work out better than almost any mobile ad arrangements that people have on websites, even larger websites that can sell ads directly. The 100% if you sell your own ads is also very attractive, but only available to larger websites. But these aren't concessions. They're like, it costs Facebook nothing to do this. They could offer publishers virtually anything. They could pay publishers just straight up to put content on Facebook, and it wouldn't put the tiniest dent in their budget. So it's really less about like worrying about how the specific terms might change, or imagining some sort of like negotiation at some table somewhere about the details of these high stakes deals. It's more like a worry that if this is successful for publishers, and they become very dependent on this revenue stream coming through Facebook, that they are then exposed to whatever changes happen later. It's not that Facebook. It's less about Facebook like doing something malicious or saying, you know what, the deal is off. It's more like Facebook's greater situation changes, which happens all the time. Facebook is very different now than it was 2 years ago or 2 years before that, and I expect it to be very different a few years from now. They're a very aggressive company that is more than happy to change how their service works in order to keep people using it. To fix your media company to one feature of Facebook, a company that changes features and moves features and kills features all the time, seems like something that companies should at least be more aware of as they do it.
Yeah. Deepa, what's your take? I mean, do you think publishers should be wary of Facebook, or should they be pretty excited to get in on this to basically improve the experience for the users on mobile apps?
I mean, I think publishers are wary of this. I think they are very aware of some of the power dynamics that John was talking about. I mean, when it comes to the Facebook newsfeed, where you have one story after the other, every article about an earthquake in Nepal competes with every first child that your friend has, or wedding pictures, or, it's every type of content competes with every type of content. It's a completely different world that you're living in. And Facebook has a track record of changing an algorithm to, help improve the user experience. And they're unapologetic about that. But each time they make a coding glitch or coding change, or if there's a glitch in the algorithm, it causes a lot of disruption. So it's impossible to avoid. You have to engage with Facebook on some level, and you whether or not you need to participate in instant articles is to be seen. But it's if you have to consider it, and you have to watch it very closely, and that's not an option anymore. So I think the publishers, of course, are cautious and careful about it, but it's an inevitability in some respects.
Yeah, and what about paid content and subscription content? I know the New York Times is on there, even though they do, have a certain paywall. I mean, will it hurt subscriptions in a way?
I don't know. I think that it's interesting. If I'm understanding the dynamics correctly, I don't think the Facebook hosted New York Times articles count towards your 10. So your 10 free articles a month. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that Times is just sort of testing it and seeing how it fares and what kind of traffic and readers they get. I mean, I think that's how all these different publishers are thinking about it. But it could hurt. It seems to me like that's an issue that needs to be resolved in the future. I think first you have to see if the feature will be popular. Facebook doesn't have a perfect track record either. Sometimes these articles, these initiatives don't work out. I mean, their last news-related kind of effort, Social Reader with the Washington Post a few years ago, had to be shut down because it was too spammy and they had to start over. And Paper also sort of failed to gain traction. So there's no guarantee that Facebook will succeed here either, and that's something we need to watch. We just need to watch how popular the articles are compared to other types of content on the site.
Yeah, good point. Michael, I'm curious what your take is on this so far, especially we've seen some of the restrictions they put on the ads that go into instant articles. I know you have to have a certain format, you can only have a certain number of ads. I mean, do you think it's a good experience so far for users and for advertisers too?
There's nothing exceptional about it for advertisers. I mean, all we've really seen are kind of boxy banner ads so far. And from the conversations that I've had with the people who buy media and people on the client side, I mean, they've essentially taken a wait-and-see approach so far to see if people are, really consuming these types of articles and how they're consuming them and the sort of data that they get back. I think that the more interesting thing about this is not like the banner ads that they're going to serve within these articles, but the fact that there could be potential for sponsored content to appear in there. I mean, BuzzFeed has already come out and said, yes, we are going to have our native ads or our sponsored content, as they put it, render natively within Facebook Instant Articles. Facebook, for its part, has basically said, we're looking at this right now. And both the Atlantic and the New York Times, which do rely to some extent on sponsored content, have suggested that they're looking into it as well. So it could be interesting if we start seeing, some really kind of splashy native ads appearing within this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because BuzzFeed right now, what they had like a banner ad going to one of their sponsored articles. So yeah. It's like you can tell this is definitely an early version. I mean, you think this might be actually more interesting when it comes to native than it does just kind of banners and other types of ads.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we're just selling banner ads in there, then I don't think anybody's going to get rich from this. Not Facebook, not the publishers. And I mean, to say that they're going to get rich from putting sponsored ads in there or sponsored content in there is a stretch as well. But I mean, nobody's going to really benefit that greatly if all we're doing is putting, like these pretty static ads in there.
Yeah. And Andrew, what's your take on this move now? I know we've talked many times about kind of the return of the walled gardens, and we've seen Snapchat decides who the publishers are that get to play in their Discover area, and now we've got Facebook making specific deals with publishers and deciding who gets the instant articles. I mean, is this another kind of walled garden where only the certain people can play, or do you think this will eventually be open for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. If you look at 1995 is the kind of the birth of the open web. This is 20 years later, a big reversal on that trend, right? Remember that one of the obstacles to the New York Times getting on the web was that they had kind of a lockup in being hosted on AOL as a closed platform. And now 20 years later, we have New York Times saying, yeah, let's jump into the garden that is Facebook. I mean, but the reality is, if you look at something like what O'Malley just published recently, it's a lot about mobile speed. And he had a really good breakdown of how you want these sites to load faster. When you're on a mobile, the same type of delays that you see on a desktop will just cause someone to go somewhere else and not consume that content. These platforms are ever more complex. There are a lot of challenges with commenting, with scalability, with security, denial of service attacks. And if you've got a platform like Facebook that basically just says, do your content, do your reporting, just put yourself on our platform, you can keep the ad revenue, it's really attractive for these companies to be able to do that. But as other folks have said, you kind of trade off that audience and the immediacy and those features for control of your platform going forward. So if you have your multimedia team saying, I want to do X, I want to do Y, unless Facebook supports that, you're not going to have that. But as you said, one of the things that we're also seeing with the advent of Snapchat Discover, of AJ Plus, of Yahoo News Digest, we're doing really cool multimedia things. Those are all closed platforms, and kind of with the death of Flash, people have just been going their own way with closed apps that do really slick things. But I do worry somewhat that the open standards in the open web are being compromised at the same time.
Andrew, I'm glad that you mentioned that about 20 years ago and AOL, because some of the publishing execs that I talked to who have been around for a while say that this is just like deja vu, because, again, 20 years ago, this was exactly the case, is that publishers were trying to, have people find them via AOL. And the interesting part is, at that time, in the first iteration of it at least, AOL was actually paying these publishers to be on the platform. So it was an additional revenue stream for them. And then somewhere along the lines it flipped, where publishers then had to start paying AOL, and so it goes. So, I mean, this could just be a case of history repeating itself.
Or were we destined to just do the pendulum swing every 10, 15 years back and forth?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's also similar to the kind of app versus native app. Do you do something on your own app, and where does your content go on mobile? John, I'm curious your take on kind of what happens with stories in mobile and on social where people don't really care who wrote them. People might not even care what publication it came from. You're just reading the stream of stories, right?
Yeah.
Is there something to worry about? I mean, I know you wrote and noticed that a lot of the first things that were in instant articles were long form, but you think that will change, and you think things will become somewhat commoditized if you're just seeing this kind of stream of stories popping up into instant articles?
I mean, I think a lot of publications' self-images are kind of threatened when they don't own their platform at all, or when they don't control their distribution. In particular, some of the newer publications that have been able to scale very quickly on the back of social referrals. It's fascinating to watch, sites get a little bit of venture funding, hit that magic 20 or 30 million uniques target by doing general interest kind of newsy content for millennials or something like that. There are a lot of those things happening right now. There are the more viral ones. There are the more sort of culture-centric ones. But when you take away the sites and mingle those things together, this sort of sameness of the content might become more of an issue. It's really, I think it is true that publications have been very cautious about their dealings with Facebook, or at least talked about being cautious. But I'm not sure that people have really reckoned with what it means to be a platform publisher in general. I think a lot of publications just become conceptually incoherent the second they lose their distribution. It has, I was trying to make a list about this the other day and run through all the different media categories that are going to change or that would change on platforms. And think about celebrity journalism, access-dependent journalism. When you're sharing the same channel as the subjects that you're writing about, what exactly do you offer? Why would they talk to you? You don't have an audience to offer them. You basically have the brand of your publication, which is probably flimsier than you think, particularly if you accumulated an audience very rapidly and very recently, or turned over your old audience for a new one by doing different things with your website. The enthusiast press is in kind of a tough place. How do you start? How do you run a video game publication in general, but especially on platforms that is more fun or more engaging for its readers than just like the subreddit for games or than the group chat within the game? What can you offer? It seems like it makes a lot of things that people do more questionable. It leaves plenty of things, but I think it dramatically changes a lot of what publications should expect to do, or should expect to be rewarded for.
Yeah.
When you flatten everything into one feed, it's, I think, a bigger deal than people want it to be.
Yeah. Deepa, what do you think about that, kind of the loss of branding with publications?
I guess I question kind of whether that's not a little bit, right? Every time, at least in the Valley, every time somebody breaks a story, there is the one breaking news story, and then there are thousands of stories that analyze it. And, it's an echo chamber, and I think that's true with a lot of news coverage now, period. I think there's a lot of repeated, replicated work that doesn't need to be done that way. I wonder if you do flatten it and you have all these publications essentially putting their coverage on the same feed, I wonder whether there might be actually a positive effect of it encouraging editors to actually weed out the kind of commoditized, everybody else is doing it kind of work, focusing on stuff that actually is differentiated. It might be a very optimistic, potentially naive way of thinking about it, but I think that could be one potential outcome. I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
That could definitely happen. I think Facebook, as a referrer, has encouraged lots of duplication, especially around particular pieces of media or breaking news stories. People sort of assumed early on, especially when BuzzFeed was getting started, that social sharing would not favor the aggregated piece, that it would sort of weed out the 500-word rewrite or the quick block quoted thing. But people just came up with forms of aggregation that function really, really well on social. Maybe that's one of the problems that Instant Articles is meant to address, that you have literally over 100 commercial websites embedding the same John Oliver video every week, with absolutely no value added in most cases. But I'm not sure that's true. I mean, maybe one of the ways they solve that is by gatekeeping and saying only certain publications get to use this favored platform. Maybe they don't want, dozens and dozens of like overnight viral sites to re-embed content on instant articles and reap ad revenue from it. Like it kind of depends on how they do this. But I mean, they're creating a new system, and the media in dealing with referrers over the last few years has proven really, really good at gaming whatever system they are given, whether it's Facebook as a refer, Google as a refer, Twitter as a refer, or just as a host for content. I mean, my Twitter feed is so ruined now by people just like screenshotting text that people are now formalizing the text screenshots into a new system. Like a former Twitter executive is now running like the most prominent Twitter screenshot text startup, so that will be. I don't know. It's completely crazy. Like when you construct systems like this, people find ways. And I think maybe Facebook is pushing up against that. But I don't know. I like that idea that maybe it'll just overnight destroy the hundreds and hundreds of social reblogs of every single thing that happens in the world.
Would be nice.
It would be. Michael, what's your take on just the I hate to get back to the advertising part of it, but Facebook is so dominant now in mobile advertising. They're taking a bigger and bigger chunk of it. It seems like with each passing month, each passing quarter. I mean, is it something where publishers kind of have to play in their sandbox because they have such a large share of mobile ads, even if they're not? Eventually, maybe the terms will change, and maybe they won't get such a good deal. But they kind of is there almost like they feel like they're forced to work with them?
I would definitely say so. Publishers are all seeing more than 50% of their traffic come from mobile, and yet it represents a fraction of their revenue. I mean, the New York Times is one of the few companies to actually break that out, and they have well north of 50% of their traffic now coming from mobile devices, and yet 10% of their ad revenue is coming from mobile ads. And so this does address a problem with actually making money from these huge audiences that are coming from mobile. I mean, that's not going to reverse. People aren't going to all of a sudden say like, hey, this supercomputer in my pocket is no longer convenient. I'm going to start breaking out a desktop to look at this. Like, this is an irreversible trend. And if publishers want to make money from it, I mean, they're going to have to get into bed with these larger players, or somehow, and this seems like an impossibility to me, but somehow like come together and create some sort of like consortium of publishers and like sell together, which I know that people have talked about and been sort of tried to drum up attention towards, but I don't think that's really in the cards.
Yeah, these consortium ideas. I mean, they've tried some of those things and they don't seem to ever be very effective.
Yeah.
Andrew, what's your take on that? Like just the amount of advertising that Facebook and Twitter and Google really dominate in mobile ads, and it's something that publishers and any other smaller players have to think about how to play in their world, really.
Yeah, I think it's a dominant position that's hard to imagine someone else challenging anytime soon. In terms of habits, I didn't think anyone could ever get us to wear watches again, yet here we are as idiots wearing these watches. But I tend to agree. I can't see a scenario where we ditch our mobile devices for desktops or laptops again anytime soon. So the future of advertising has to be something that is mobile friendly, and it can't has to evolve to be more in line with how the evolution of content is on our mobiles. Again, I really can't see, unless Twitter really does something spectacular, but Twitter's having its own problems in terms of how does it stay current. As folks said, Twitter is messy, it's useful in dribs and drabs, but Google and Facebook look like they're it, and no one's really challenging that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the discussion. It was really good. I want to thank our guests on the panel, Andrew Lee, Deepa Sitharaman from Wall Street Journal, John Herman from The All, Michael Sebastian from Ad Age, our producer Jefferson Yen in LA. Want to thank our sponsor NextSpace and NextKids in San Francisco. You can learn more about their program at nextspace.us/nextkids, and catch us each and every Friday on the Mediatwits at mediashift@mediashift.org. We'll catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.